ask you this. You claim that you did not want to do it, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. But yet you were the first one that shot, right?
Yes, sir.
Why didn't you shoot the guy making you do it? Why did you shoot an innocent man?
We are about to watch a series of parole hearings of a man who, when he was just 16 years old at the time, took a life and was given a life sentence. Now, you might remember these hearings because we did cover it on December 21st of 2023, and it has about 17,000 views, so you may have seen it. But why I'm coming back to this is that there was recently another hearing for this same man. So it covers some of our favorite parole board members, Mr. O'Shea, Miss Jackson. It jumps into a co-defendant's commutation hearing where we have our full gambit. And then we fast forward all the way to 5/2/2024, where we see new parole board members, some of whom I think are quickly becoming our favorites. If you've already seen the hearings, feel free to skip to the next portion. I'll put the timestamp in the description. With that, let's jump in.
1980, classified as a first offender, offense second-degree murder, sentencing date January 27, 1998, but resentenced in August 15, 2016. Sentenced to life. Parole date is December 30th, 2021. Good time is none. Full term is life. Is this information correct, sir?
I could. Yes. Let me see it.
Mr. Roche.
Can you hear? I can hear now. Just keep skipping.
Thank you, Mr. Reeser. Can you hear me, Mr. Keith?
Yes, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Keith. How are you?
Good morning. You? I'm fine.
Good. Members of the panel, Mr. Keith is a juvenile lifer. He was sentenced his second-degree murder case to life without benefits. Because of the Supreme Court case of Miller in Louisiana, case of Montgomery, and an act of the state legislature, he became eligible for parole after 25 years of 25 years, became eligible for parole after 25 years of his sentence. He is a first felony offender. This was his only arrest, and he has no supervision history. I've read his mental health evaluation, which is a requirement in juvenile lifers cases, and it was a good mental health evaluation. No issues at the time, and the author of the evaluation said that he should perform very well if and when he's ever released. He has a low risk assessment. He's earned his GED while he was incarcerated. Have you done any other advancement towards your education since you received the GED?
Yes, sir. I completed carpenter school.
Okay, good. You have a trade. Good.
Yes, sir.
The programs that he's completed: personal development, problem solving, anger management, money management, victim awareness and restitution, employment skills, 100 hours pre-release, inside out dad, living in balance parts 1 and 2. Are there any other programs that you would like to mention?
Yes, sir. I'm currently attending Thinking for a Change.
You're currently enrolled.
Yes, sir.
Good. Excellent course. What have you got from Thinking for a Change so far?
Thinking for a Change has helped me develop better social skills and to talk to people and let them talk and understand where they come from and give them information and receive information back so we can help each other.
Okay. It's all about changing your mindset and changing the way you do things.
Yes, sir.
What is your job at Louisiana State Penitentiary?
I'm currently a compound orderly for the rodeo ground. And
Okay.
I paint and cut grass and whatever else they need me to do, I do it.
So actually sort of like a maintenance man.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are you a trustee?
No, sir, I'm not.
Okay. Tell us what your transition plan if you are released. Where will you work and where will you live?
Okay. I'm looking to go for the parole project for the transition.
Okay. And I'm almost sure Mr. Huntley will outline the transition plan that he has set up for you at the time later on in this interview. I see you have a vocational skill. So let's talk about drugs and alcohol. You were 16 at the time of this offense. Had you started using drugs and alcohol?
No, sir.
Have you ever used drugs or alcohol?
Yes, I have before. Yes, sir. Under
Okay.
peer pressure.
So was it before your offense or after?
Oh, it was way before my offense.
Okay, so at what age did you start using drugs?
I've never used drugs. I was drinking. I drink alcohol from time to, partying with friends and stuff on the weekend. That's it.
How old were you?
15.
So let's get the record straight. You have never used drugs.
No, sir.
At what age did you start using alcohol?
I was about 15 years old.
And alcohol did not play a part.
No, sir.
Okay.
Drugs, no alcohol played a part.
So Mr. Irish just convinced you to go along with him.
No, sir, he did not.
Then why did you take the firearm from him and he suggests that you shoot first? Why did you do that?
I refused.
You refused.
Yes, sir.
So you didn't shoot the victim.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
Okay.
I was held at gunpoint and told that I better shoot.
Okay. That part was not in the report. Okay, let's continue. What community service have you rendered to your fellow offenders while incarcerated?
Community service?
Yeah.
I've never been a part of a club or anything since I've been in Angola, but I've helped offenders go to and from jail that are in wheelchairs that cannot walk or have anybody else push them down there. I've assisted them with that.
Okay.
If anybody's needed help, friends, I've always been quick to give them a hand and help them any way I can.
So you've not worked in a toy shop, you've not worked with the Point Lookout Project or any organized community service project?
No, sir.
Okay,
This is stuff I've done on my own free will.
good. And that counts a little bit more than organized. You do it because it's the right thing to do.
Yes, sir.
Opposition in this case comes from the entire legal community. The sentencing judge, the DA's office, the Caddo Parish Sheriff's Office, and the Chief of Police of Shreveport, Louisiana. You have opposition from the victim's son, Ms. Kathy Rowan Walker, the victim's wife at the time he was murdered, Emily Rowan Cope, his daughter, Lydia Rowan, his sister, and his 13 additional letters from family, friend, clergy, and most important, the community at large. People within the community that knew the victim or the victim's family has sent letters opposing your early release. I think you also have letters of support from your aunt and your girlfriend. I'm going to tell you very frankly, Mr. Keith, I have a major concern about your rehabilitation and your maturity. And I'm going to tell you what my concern is. Your general disciplinary conduct over the last 10 years has been less than desirable. You have 13 write-ups in the last 10 years. You have over 60 disciplinary write-ups in your 24 years of incarceration. You've been either in the working cell block or segregated quarters or changed your security level 4 times in the last 5 years. You've been in the working cell block or segregated quarters 14 times during your incarceration. You have 5 or 6 write-ups for 6 offenses. Your last disciplinary write-up on August 20, 2019, which is less than 2 years ago, was a 21C for a sex offense. 13 of your disciplinary write-ups were between the age of 30 and 40 years old. Most experts say that a male child, this is psychological, social workers, medical experts say that a male child matures around the ages of 27 and 30 years of age. That's fully mature. It takes us a little longer than our female counterparts come to the realization that we have to act as an adult. But between the ages of 30, after you should have reached full maturity, you had 13 disciplinary write-ups. And some of those are very serious write-ups. You've been sent to the working cell block during that period of 30 and 40, which shows a lack of maturity and a lack of rehabilitation. And the courts say that when a parole panel is considering parole for a juvenile lifer, it is to look for maturity, a certain level of maturity, and a level of rehabilitation. I don't see either today, simply because of your disciplinary conduct. Often when I see a juvenile lifer, I'd like to see 3 to 5 to 6 years where there's no disciplinary write-ups, where there's excellent programs, where there's excellent community service, to show that you've reached a level of rehabilitation, that you realize that it's not all about yourself, it's about helping individuals. It's about following rules and regulations, not breaking them after over 20 years of incarceration. Your last write-up was less than 2 years ago. You've been incarcerated for 24 years. You should know the rules and regulations. And if you reach that level of maturity, you would know better. So it's a major concern for me. Warden Hooper, would you like to make any comments, remarks, observations at this time?
Yes, just to piggyback on what you're saying, he has a total of 58 disciplinary reports. And
Well, you have a couple of doubles in there, and I count the doubles as 2.
okay, but so basically, it looks like he slows down with his write-ups in 2015. Picks up 4 since 2015. He did receive his GED in April 29th of 2005, so he got that early on. He's completed his 100 hours, and he does have a low Tiger score. So, just for the board's information.
Thank you, Warden. Mr. Reese, that completes my presentation.
Thank you. Ms. Jackson?
Yes, Mr. Keith, you were in court in Caddo on August 15th of 2016, appearing before Judge Ramona Emanuel. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And the purpose of that appearance was for her to determine whether or not you should be granted eligibility for parole as a juvenile lifer. Do you remember that court appearance?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you remember the behavior that you demonstrated at that court appearance?
Was the attorney? Yes, ma'am.
And there's a transcript or an excerpt of a transcript that was submitted by one of the individuals opposing your receiving parole. Mr. Goins, that was your attorney, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
After Judge Emanuel made her ruling, Mr. Goins says, and we'll file appropriate motions for appeal and designation of the record, Your Honor. And the court duly noted. Defendant, what? Appeal it? Man, you ain't never seen me. You've never answered my letters or nothing. How are you going to appeal it for me? Mr. Goins, yes, I did. Yes, I did. Defendant, full of shit, man. You're full of shit. The court, I'm not going to tolerate that language, Mr. Keith. How would you respond to that behavior, Mr. Keith?
I was out of line. I was angry. I was upset because I've never seen that man before in my life.
Well, but Mr. Keith, can't you understand how that's a cause of concern for us, that you're even in that setting, even in that environment, even when you're appearing before a judge who has the power to decide whether or not you even get to the point that you are right now, your response is to be unable to control your anger and your temper, and you lash out at the attorney who is making every effort to help you. And obviously he did help you because the judge did see fit to give you the opportunity to have this day, and you use profanity towards him and in the presence of the court. You know, I understand that when you're 16, you're immature, you're impulsive, you don't think ahead, you don't truly understand the magnitude of your actions. But in 2016, Mr. Keith, you should have acquired that level of maturity that would have prevented you from responding in this way. I mean, that's very troubling to me. So really, that's all I have, Mr. Roche. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Ms. Teresa?
Thank you. Okay, we will now hear from our participants. Can we please hear from Andrew Hunley first?
Thank you, Andrew Hunley with Louisiana Parole Project. Here to let the board know today that if you would choose to grant Audy Keith his request for parole, Parole Project would be willing to have Audy in our reentry program. As you're aware, Louisiana Parole Project has served now 200 clients through our reentry program. We have a very positive success rate, especially as it relates to juvenile lifers. And based on Audy's low-risk Tiger score, we feel like he would not be an individual who would be at risk for recidivating. Would like to also mention that Louisiana Parole Project would be willing to provide Audy long-term reentry support in light of the community's attitudes towards Audy in the Caddo area. We recognize that this board may choose, if they were willing to grant him, that he may not, the board may not see fit for him to return to that area. Just letting you know that we would work with Audy to ensure that he had long-term residence in an area he could be successful if that's what the board chose. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Now, can we please hear from Ms. Connie, who's the mother?
Yes. I'm Audy Keith's mother. My name is Connie Nowlin, and he has all his family support. His siblings, nieces, nephews, his grandmother, who is very ill with Alzheimer and also is a dialysis patient. And she actually helped raise him as a child. And we don't want to have her around much longer, so we were hoping that the board would see fit to allow Audy to go home or come home and join the reentry program with Andrew Huntley.
Thank you. Now, can we please hear from Ms. Rhonda, who is the fiance?
Yes, my name is Rhonda Laughlin, and I'm his fiance. I had submitted a request and let everyone know that I would do my best to my ability to help rehabilitate him if y'all would let him be released and go through any program he needed to help him along the way and reestablish his life in society. He is a good man. As much as I've known him since we have been together and before even being friends, I've seen a tremendous change in him, and I would be very honored if y'all would grant him his parole.
Ms. Laughlin, we do have your letter.
Thank you. Now, can we please hear from Ms. Tracy, who's an aunt?
Good morning. Yes, first of all, I want to thank Mr. Roche and Ms. Jackson for the concerns that they shared with all of us today. Simply put, I am asking for an extension of grace today. I do believe that, as Mr. Roche mentioned, that it took him longer to mature, much longer to mature than most people, most men. But I believe today that all of this, that all of that, if he were to be granted parole today, that upon his time working up until his release date, that a lot of great and good things would continue to happen for him. And I believe that he has shown that he can be productive in society, even though it has been a number of years that he has been incarcerated. But I have a lot of faith in God. I have a lot of faith in my nephew as a person. And that's just the kind of person that I am. I have a lot of hope and a lot of faith. So I am asking that he be granted parole today. Thank you.
Thank you. Now let's hear from opposition. Can we please hear from Ms. Linda, who's the victim's sister?
Yes, thank you for carefully reviewing this case and reading the numerous letters and emails that were written by our friends and family hoping to prevent the release of Audy Keith. I want to share this photo with you. This shows Russ with his 11-year-old son, Matt, the day before he was senselessly murdered. Russ thought he was creating memories for his son of a first hunting trip. What Russ couldn't know is this would be the first and last hunting trip with Matt. While Russ was teaching Matt gun safety and that shooting a gun at a living creature would result in harm or death to that creature, Audy Keith was participating in the planning of a robbery and murder of a man he didn't even know. Audy knew the morning of December 30th that he was going to help his friends in their plan to rob and kill Russ. Audy had nothing to gain from this act. He could have backed out on 2 different occasions, but he chose not to. Earlier that morning, Russ was called to collect back rent for the mobile home that Russ purchased for Audy's accomplice in this crime. While at the trailer, Audy and his friends visited with Russ and his son about the previous deer hunt. Then they lied about the reason that they lured him there. As the day progressed, Audy and his friends revisited their early failed plan to rob and kill Russ. Audy was still a willing participant in what was to come. Russ never expected to become their prey. He was lured to the trailer for a second time, only after firing a bullet through the body of my brother and stealing the money from his truck for his friends. Audy decided that he no longer wanted to be a part of this horrific scheme. Audy not only took the life of my only sibling, the only son of my aged mother, he took the father and grandfather from his daughter, Emily, and his son, Matt, and their 2 beautiful families. This is Matt and his beautiful family. This is Emily and her beautiful family. Audy is thriving in Angola prison. He has a Facebook page where he describes himself as a cool, down-to-earth person that treats others with respect. Russ, on the other hand, took a bullet to his face. This is a copy of the picture of the Facebook page. I hope that you, the parole board, never have to feel the grief that our family has endured. And I hope that you never experience a tragedy like this. I beg that you deny Audy Keith the opportunity to inflict this pain on anyone else. Please support the original sentence of life without benefit of parole, which was promised to our family and friends. Thank you.
Miss Lydia, Miss Linda, we did get all of your letters from each one of your family members, and they were read in their entirety.
Thank you.
Ms. Teresa?
Thank you. Now can we please hear from Mr. Bob, who's the victim's friend?
Yes, I've known Russ from birth and went through school with him and each other's weddings. He left, went to the Marine Corps, was a U.S. Marine, came back. We worked together at KCS Railroad. and both went out and went into business for ourselves. Russ was at a thriving business that was growing and a very, productive member of society, as they say, as a taxpayer and everything. This was a senseless killing. What I did not hear from Audy was that a humble and contrite man that is now a Bible-believing Christian participating in Bible study. And what I heard was excuses of peer pressure, the devil made me do it mentality, rather than taking responsibility for what you did and apologizing for it and being contrite about it. So I do not think he needs to be released. At this point, he would be worse than he was. So I asked the parole board to deny parole and continue with the life sentence. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe that is all the participants that would like to speak. Mr. Key, would you like to make a brief statement before the board votes?
Yes, ma'am, I would. I'd like to take this time and say that I'm sorry again for what happened all those years ago when I did do it. Yes, no, I wasn't an active participant in it, and I was forced into doing it. That's why that I realized that what happened during that time, that it was wrong that happened, and I took responsibility for what happened during that time. That's why I pled guilty to the crime in 1998, and I was the star witness for the state to help convict my co-defendant for him to be placed on death row.
Thank you, Mr. Keith. Is the panel ready to vote? This case was assigned to me, so I will be the lead vote. Mr. Keith.
Yes, sir.
After reading all the information that was at my disposal, I've come up with the idea, first of all, that the level of maturity we are looking for today, you have not reached that level of maturity. You've had 13 disciplinary write-ups in the last 10 years. You have a 21C less than 2 years ago. Ideally, I would like to see a record of no disciplinary write-ups for at least 3 to 5 years in these long-term sentencing cases to show me that you've reached a level of rehabilitation that you know the difference between right and wrong. So the level of maturity we're looking for, I did not find. The level of rehabilitation is not there. Along with the express opposition from the entire legal community, the judge, the DA's office, the sheriff's office, and the chief of police, along with the victim's family, who is adamantly opposed to any early release. We have opposition from the community at large. Therefore, my vote today is to deny your request based upon all the information I've just articulated. Mr. Wise.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. In this case here, I sat and I went over this case for a long time, and I looked at the case, and I agree with Mr. Roche. One of the things I see, you had 5 21s, sex offenses in your jacket. Also, your DB reports in 2029. There's a time, we see people all the time. I've been on this board almost 18 years. And I see these people come before us. When they come before us, I've seen them just like you. I think Mr. Hunley may have been one of them. His disciplinary write-ups he didn't have a lot of disciplinary write-ups. You need to get in there and they was talking about the Facebook page and things like that. I see where you've had other write-ups, like I just to go over aggravated disobedience. You had 21 of those in your jacket. Get a hold of this thing, work on it. Today, my vote is to deny.
Thank you, Mr. Wise.
Thank you.
Mrs. Jackson.
Mr. Keith, I concur with my fellow board members with respect to the number of disciplinary actions that you've accumulated. The fact that as recently as 2019, there was a write-up for a sex offense. I don't find that you've engaged in a lot of programs that would not only benefit you, but benefit others within the institution. And there's intense family, community, and law enforcement opposition. But what I would say, as I read the victim opposition letters, even though they were opposed, I saw that there was an opportunity for grace. If you had just changed, if you had just become a better person, there's something in me that says hearts could have been softened if they had seen anything in you that indicated that you had truly been remorseful for your actions. If you had spent all this time working to better yourself and to help others, there might have been a softening in their attitudes towards you. But I think what's really gotten to them, in addition to the crime itself, is the fact that you don't seem to have learned very much. You don't seem to have grown up or matured, as evidenced by that outburst in court in 2016. No contrition, no humility, no true empathy for what you did in this case. And so my, request of you is to look inward at yourself. Don't blame anybody on the screen for the decision today. Look inward at yourself and figure out what it is that you need to truly change. Because, right now, I just don't think you're where you need to be. And for those reasons, I also will deny your request.
Thank you, Mr. Keith. You have received 3 votes to deny your request for early release. You have gotten statements and comments and advice and just good information from all 3 members of the panel. It is live up to you whether you take that advice or not. But you know what you have to do, and maybe next time it may be different if you change your mindset. So our decision today is to deny your request. This concludes this hearing.
That's it. Come on.
Mr. Roche, I believe that is the last case at Angola. Can we please close out?
Thank you, Mr. Reese. Warren Hooper,
Yes, sir.
thank you for your assistance. It's nice seeing you. We're going to stand adjourned at Louisiana State Penitentiary. It is 9:48 a.m.
Thank y'all. Come on.
Okay, so what we're going to do now is watch the same unpacking that I gave for this last year. Again, this hearing took place in 2021. We covered it December 2023. Many of you have already seen it, and if you have, feel free to skip forward. If you haven't, I think it's worth watching the unpacking to get all the details of this crime. Then we're going to watch his co-defendant's death sentence commutation hearing, or at least a part of it. And then finally, we're going to watch the hearing that took place on May 1st, 2024, about 3 years to the date. that this parole hearing had first taken place, and it's a whole new parole board. So it's going to be interesting to see what changes he makes to his parole hearing and if they grant. With that, let's jump into my unpacking. Here we go. Where does one even start with this hearing? This guy, you see him sitting there like emotionless, and you're just saying, what is wrong with him? But you know what's the I think to be hilarious, or just I'm sorry, but we just saw this hearing, right? Even I felt his family members were aware or not in denial that he needs a lot of work. I mean, one of them said, let us get him help on the outside. And the other is like, yeah, he's not really mature, but they were trying, but they weren't in denial, I don't think. And yet, we have two professionals. We have the low risk score, and we have the therapist who said that the mental health evaluation, who said that he would perform well on the outside if released. I'm real glad that the DOC is paying these PhDs to tell us things that make absolutely no sense. Low risk score. Okay. Then the next thing that we can get out of the way, because I know that many of you might be wondering, and that is, what is a 21C? Well, a 21C is a sex offense. There's A, there's B, there's C. Now, C is sexual misconduct, offender on offender, contact or attempted contact between, you can read the rest for yourself. Now, it's not a B, which would be abusive, which would be offender on offender, but where it's, sorry, it would not be A, which is non-consensual. So it's C. It's the least, I guess, bad sex offense. But I mean, obviously, that's whatever. He was 16 when he committed this crime, and we can go over the information that Richard provided about his crime, and it is just brutal. It is so brutal. And we find out, and it's always like the good ones get taken. We find this is a father. He's an ex-Marine. He just went on his first and last hunting trip with his son. An entrepreneur, just really a good guy. And these punks, these little punks, take his life, and they take his life in a brutal way. And he sits here and he says, I testified against my co-defendants. And it's like, okay, you're okay. You want a cookie? Like, it's hard to imagine. I love how Miss Jackson came down and just like ripped him a new one for what he did, which is recent. He's not a young guy. He's been locked up a long time. He's to go and start yelling at the attorney in front of the judge. What's amazing to me is that even after that outburst, a judge still says that he should get a right for parole, which I guess maybe is just out of their control. I don't know, with the federal ruling, because he was a child and due process and blah, blah, blah. But man, I mean, it is clear, if there's from any hearing that we have seen, I think this one is clear that this punk is not ready to be on the outside. I mean, imagine what it would happen to him on the outside, how quickly he would probably get relocked up. If anything, it can show us and give us some appreciation for what a proper conduct record looks like. And I think I'll play a hearing after this where we do see a glimpse of what a proper conduct record looks like. Although I watched it before I watched this one, so my commentary might not line up exactly, so keep that in mind. But because I got pretty upset, but not at the inmate as much as I got upset at the board and how they handled the case. So, okay, let's share this tab. On the morning of December 30th, 1996. December 30th, 1996. Petitioner Daniel Irish telephoned Russ Rowland, his landlord, and told Rowland that he had $500 of the back rent that he owed him. Little did Rowland know that Irish had been talking for several days about how he intended to rob and kill someone who had a lot of money, and he had settled on Rowland as the victim. When Rowland arrived at the trailer early that morning, however, Irish did not follow through with his plan. Instead, he told him that the checkbook had gone missing and to come back. Can you imagine all of this over $500? 1 month's rent? Are you kidding me? Pathetic. Later that day, Irish, his girlfriend Christy Klein, and friends Audy, Keith, and Jason drove to the local Walmart store. All 4 young people lived in the same trailer park and had been hanging out together for a few months since Irish's mother and stepfather had moved out of town. Klein had been living with Irish in the trailer, which was without phone service. On the way back from Walmart, Irish again began to talk about how he needed money and that he should rob and kill someone to get it. What a brilliant guy. He's going to rob and kill someone. Wow, you're so smart. Now remember, this is not who we just saw. This is his co-defendant who we probably testified against, right? Irish, driving Klein's car, stopped at a convenience store and used the payphone to call Rowland's office again. So he's like, he decided, okay, you know what? We'll do it this time. We'll get him to come back. He left a message with Rowland's secretary. He had what Russ needed. And if Rowland would come by, he'd take care of him. Look at that. He actually thinks, you can see the words he used, he'd take care of him. He actually thinks he's being like, oh, I'll take care of him. It's such a senseless, ridiculous crime that you had zero chance of getting away with. The whole thing is so absurd. And that's what they'll say, well, that's exactly why they should get a different chance. They were young and their brains aren't working. And it's like, yeah, but no, it means you fall under like the 0.1% of the 1% or whatever the math is of people who just shouldn't. It's not, it doesn't. And he claims he was sober. I know this is a different guy, but we'll get up to him. Keith comes into the picture now. Irish, Klein, and Keith waited at Irish's trailer home for Russ to arrive. They didn't have to wait long. When Rowland arrived around 3 p.m., Audy Keith was sitting in a chair in the living room, and as Rowland stepped to open the door, Keith, this prince who we just saw, he fired a blast from his 12-gauge shotgun, hitting this Marine, this dad, this husband, this entrepreneur, this son. He hit him with a 12-gauge shotgun, point blank. You think this 16-year-old should get out? You think he has a low risk score? You think he has a high chance of succeeding? He hits him in the abdomen, which you can only imagine is got to be the most utterly painful, the extreme pain. They say abdomen shots, stomach shots are just brutal. He collapses on the wooden porch outside the front door. Irish took the shotgun and attempted to fire it. So now the second guy takes it, who needed his rent money. But it had misloaded and would not fire. So then Irish picked up his 30-30 rifle, his 30-30, while Rowland was begging for his life. So these punks, they got a shotgun, they got a 30-30. They can't bring it to the pawn shop to pay for their rent. No. Instead, go ahead and murder this guy. While he's begging for his life, they stepped up to the door and fired the rifle down his right eye, blowing away a large portion of his head. Then appellant sent Keith out to the truck to look for Roland's wallet, which contained less than $200. Wow, you guys are just real brilliant, huh? He took the wallet and the money from Keith and put them under the cushion of his love seat. Keith, now sitting at the table with his head in his hands, refused to help Irish drag the body to the trailer. What's interesting here is that it does seem to show something. Like he's not, like he's in shock, he's in remorse, he's, it affected him, right? But Klein, who had hidden in the bedroom, emerged and began cleaning up the blood and the carpet where Irish had dragged Roland's body down the hallway. Jason had seen Roland's truck drive by, heard 2 shots, and came over to see what had happened. Gwyn noticed that the front porch was not wet, and that the front porch was now wet, and that there was a big black mark like a trail going down the hall. He saw Klein on his knees scrubbing at the black mark. Gwyn asked where Irish was, and Keith pointed out to the back. Gwyn walked down the hall and saw Roland's body on the floor, and Irish emerging from the bathroom. When Irish asked him to help him with the body, Gwyn couldn't speak. He saw Irish pick up the shotgun and begin to load it. Then Gwyn saw a sheriff's car entering the subdivision. Wow, these guys really lasted long, huh? They really got away with this, huh? When Irish turned towards Gwyn with the shotgun, Gwyn ran out the back door and into the wooded area behind the trailer, emerging at a neighbor's house and calling first his parole officer. Oh, he's on parole. Oh, that's great. That's just fantastic. Then the sheriff's investigator, Hensley, whom he knew had, and failing to reach them, he finally called 911 to report the murder. So who called 911? Gwyn ran out the back door, the waiter behind the trailer, emerging in the neighbor's house and calling. So Gwyn was the one that was hiding. Who was Gwyn again? I'm sorry. I want to. 3 p.m. Keith in the living room. Side, put misloaded. Roland begged for his life. I'm sorry. Oh, God. Klein hid in the bedroom. Who's Gwyn? Later that day, his girlfriend Christy Klein and a friend Audrey Keith and Jason Gwyn drove to the local Walmart. Keith, now sitting at the table with his head, began his blood carpet. Irish had dragged Roland's body to the hallway. Jason Gwyn had seen Roland's truck drive by, heard 2 shots, and came. Oh, okay. So he wasn't there. He just saw the truck and heard shots. He came in to see what happened, and that's when he noticed what was going on. Okay, so he didn't want any piece of it. He called his parole officer. He called the cops. So good for him. Good for him. These idiots. They really we owe our landlord rent. Well, let's kill him, and we won't have to pay rent. You just can't make it up, man. Wow. He called 911. Keith, Klein, and Irish soon left as well. Keith going over to another neighbor's house until his parents delivered him to authorities, and Irish and Klein leaving in the car. Steve Demont, local bondsman. Sheriff deputies walked over to Irish's trailer and observed that a hose was running water by the front porch, which had been washed down. The deputies saw blood, tissue, and bone fragments, as well as a shotgun wadding around the porch area and on the ground. Roland's white pickup truck was parked at the front of the trailer, but the trailer appeared unoccupied. And the deputies realized that the blood, tissue, and bone fragments might be human. They received information from the headquarters that reported the homicide. Investigators soon arrived and entered the unlocked back door of the trailer to see if anyone was injured inside, finding his body. And his wallet with $141 of cash were found under the cushion of the love seat. Freaking idiots. Roland's receipt book was also found in the trailer. A receipt was found made out to Danny for $500 of back rent. The self-carbon copy of the receipt was still in the book. Deputies had received a description of Klein's car, so when Irish drove back towards the trailer park around 6 p.m. to lock the back door, he was noticed by the deputies and taken into custody. Klein was picked up at Steve DeMonte's house, and several statements of Klein, Irish maintained that Keith had fired both shots from the two different weapons. Irish maintained that Keith, so Irish is now saying that Keith is the one that fired both shots. Where he relates that Danny shot him in the chest. Klein later testified that she had not seen either shot fired. Keith, who first claimed that Irish had pulled the trigger of the 12 gauge as Keith only held it, testified at trial that he indeed fired the first shot, but that Irish had forced him to do so at gunpoint. Right, okay. And that Irish had fired the rifle shot to Roland's head. At the time of the murder, Audy Keith, who was mentally slow. Really? Is that, did he look mentally? I mean, what? Okay. At the time, Audy Keith was mentally slow, was 16 years old. Christy Klein was 17 years old, and Daniel Irish was 18. Before Irish's trial, Audy Keith pled guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to life without benefit of parole. Christy Klein pled guilty to accessory after the fact of first degree and received a maximum sentence of 5 years at hard labor to run consecutive with 1 year. She received his accessory burglary in an unrelated case. Well, she got away with murder, huh? Keith testified for the state during its case in chief, and Klein testified that, I mean, she didn't, you know, I don't know what her full involvement was, right? It wasn't clear to me if she should have gotten more than 6 years. I don't know. Daniel Irish was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death on August 27th and August 28th, 1999, respectively. And he made it clear, I testified against him. You did hear him say that, right? And when you think about it, it's like, dude, you're being no hero by testifying against him, which we all know anyways, but you pulled the trigger. It was probably a fatal wound to begin with. And then you testified against him because you were going to face the death penalty otherwise. So it's just like, he is a pathetic, he's just a loser. I would love to know. Let me Google it and see if we do have a list. What happened to me for sure. Oh, who would have thought that sentence was reversed too? Danny Irish was convicted of first degree and sentenced to death in Cato Parish, 1996, killing of his landlord when he was 18. His clemency application said IQ testing has shown that he was intellectually impaired to the degree that makes him ineligible for the death penalty. Irish was denied. I mean, you know, someone who does say, I should kill my landlord, you would assume that they have like a low IQ, but man, okay. Irish was denied full clemency hearing Friday. He wanted a full clemency. Okay. Aaron Nova, the attorney representing Irish, issued the following statement. Danny Irish bears little resemblance to the teenager he was in 1996. Today's proceeding was supposed to be a full clemency hearing at which Danny would have been able to speak directly to the board and answer its questions about its growth and redemption over the past 25 years. It's unconscionable that the board, on an evenly divided vote, has denied Danny the opportunity to present detailed evidence of the role his youth, trauma, and intellectual impairment played in his crime, as well as a transformation in his responsible, caring, trustworthy, and devout man deserving of mercy. Yes, it's unconscionable that they would have to put the family through this. Really? Really? A full clemency? Are you nuts? What year is this? Oh my gosh, this is recent. Wait a minute. This is October 13, 2023. We could probably watch this exact hearing of the death row inmate. Yeah, we saw it, Antoinette Frank. Let me see if we can pull this up. Holy cow. Yes. So I found it. Richard did have it in the notes. On October 13th, for those of you who may be familiar, the governor who was leaving Louisiana tried to pass basically something which was, very controversial, which was giving the opportunity they wanted to give the opportunity for almost all death row inmates for the ability to have a hearing that would grant them the right to then have a commutation hearing that would take them off of death row. Now, this is very controversial because it was like rushed. This whole initiative was kind of rushed in. There's a lot of people on each side of the aisle that were saying this is like unconscionable that you would do this and to put all the victims through this. And if you can imagine, a lot of these cases were just the worst of the worst. We saw basic like serial killers that were gonna have the opportunity to get off of death row, and a lot of the argument was, look, it's not about it's just about getting off of death row. They're always going to be locked up in prison for life. And the counter argument for anyone who knows anything about the Louisiana system is that's not true. It's you take someone off of death row and now you're at life, you're one step closer to getting your sentence commuted. We've seen it happen. And it's funny to hear the people who are who are on the side of the death row inmates that, by the way, don't have execution dates. There's no it's not even about saving their life. It's just a strange argument because anyways, I digress. Here's a hearing where he hit this stuff, and so we're going to see it's a little bit different. We don't see him. This is a hearing to decide whether he would have a right to have a hearing to see if he should be taken off of death row. So we're probably going to see the same family talk again, and then we'll see that people have to talk on his behalf. Again, this is a different person. This is the co-defendant, the man who had the kill shot, final shot at point blank range, the man who was older, the man who needed the rent money, and who they claim was not mentally competent. So let's just jump into this, and then we can continue.
Our next case is Mr. Daniel T. Irish, DOC number 399680, date of birth February the 12th of 1978. He's a second-class felony offender. He was sentenced on November the 4th of 1999 for first-degree murder, sentenced to death. Okay, we're ready to proceed. Mr. Novot, it's my understanding you wish to go first. Normally, the attorney sometimes goes last, but you wish to go first. Okay.
Yes, sir. Good morning. My name is Aaron Novot, and I represent Danny Irish. Before I talk about Danny, I want to acknowledge the victims in this case, Russ Berlin and his family. You have suffered unimaginable pain. On Danny's behalf, I want to apologize for all the pain you have suffered. It's what I'm sure has been new, fresh pain you are feeling as the clemency process is unfolding. If Danny were here, he would express his deep remorse for the damage he has brought on your lives. He recognizes the reality is that there is nothing he can do with your pain. In that words mean little under these circumstances. He recognizes the only path to any semblance of redemption for what he has done is to spend his life trying to be a better person, a kinder person, and to do whatever he can to make this a better world. Danny's daily reflections on Mr. Rowland are what inspire him to keep learning and searching for ways to be a positive force in the world, even while confined in a death row cell. Members of the board, I know you have read our clemency petition, and I'll not repeat all the points we raised, but I do want to speak on it briefly. Danny was just 18 years old at the time of his crime. The Supreme Court has decided that a person under 18 years old cannot forfeit his life even if he takes the life of another. But the day someone turns 18, that changed. The line must be drawn somewhere, but Danny is an example of why that arbitrary line does not always track with human experience. Given the trauma he suffered while in utero, his neglectful and abusive upbringing, and his brain damage and intellectual impairments, Danny was mentally and emotionally closer to the level of a 14 or 15-year-old child than an adult in 1996. That is not an excuse for his conduct, but it helps us reconcile how an out of control teenager involved in a murder can transform into the kind, thoughtful man that Danny is today. When Danny arrived on death row, he began to process what had happened: his crime, his arrest, his trial, and conviction. Locked alone in his cell, Danny read the transcript from his trial to try and gain some understanding. He had missed many details, finding himself in a daze as events unfolded around him during his trial. And he was shaken when he read that the prosecutor argued in closing, Danny is a cancer that needs to be cut out from society. The phrase stuck in his mind, Danny is a cancer. It stuck. But as he thought about his behavior and the crime that brought him to death row, Danny found himself agreeing with the prosecutor. He had to be a cancer. It was a crossroads moment in Danny's life. He resolved that while he couldn't change what he had done, he could change who he was. Since that moment, Danny has dedicated himself to becoming the best person he can be. He has availed himself of every program available on the row, even when that meant taking classes shackled by his hands and feet, cradling a phone between his shoulder and cheek, as he gleaned what lessons he could from a trustee through a plexiglass window. He was one of the first on the road to seek out GED classes. He has made efforts to help those from childhoods like his, donating to educational programs for disadvantaged youth because he recognizes the difference education can make in their lives. He has worked hard to build a relationship with Christ, as today's speakers will describe, and he has sought to be a resource to other inmates, providing what wisdom and mentorship he can to other men who are beginning the journey he has been on for 25 years. One need look no further than the letter that former death row guard Brian Brown wrote on Danny's behalf to see the impact Danny has made. Mr. Brown got to know Danny well through their day-to-day contact. He writes, I have so much confidence in Danny's behavior that I would move him into my home with my wife and children. This letter speaks volumes, not just because Mr. Brown felt such affection for Danny, but also because he felt moved to offer such a public affirmation of the kindness and humanity of one of the death row wards. It is an example of Danny's goodness being reflected back at him by the kindness of another, something that was ironically missing from his life before he went down death row. Mr. Brown's letter confirms Danny will do well in general population, where there are a greater number of programs and vocational opportunities available to him, and where he can reach a greater number of fellow inmates. If granted clemency, his positive influence and gift for mentorship will be an asset to the prison. After I'm done speaking, you will hear from several others who will confirm the man that Danny Irish has become. I urge you to grant Danny a full hearing so that you can also hear directly from him before you make a decision. If you do, you will get to know a man who realizes there is no way he can fully atone for his actions, but despite that reality has committed his life to bring whatever light he can to the world.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now we hear from the opposition. It's Linda Rowland.
My name is Linda Rowland. I'm Russ's only sibling. He was my younger brother. These last few months have been hard on everyone. We appreciate the time that you, the board, has given to this case. We hope that you have taken the time to read the 60+ letters opposing Danny's application. Danny Irish has never accepted responsibility for his crime or expressed any sorrow or remorse to us, the family. He cares for no one but himself. And if you search his prison record, you'll see that he has had sentences for pornographic material and gambling rings. The 27-year emotional toll this crime has taken on this family and on us became even more unrelenting on May 22nd when an unknown woman showed up unannounced at the home of Russ's daughter, Emily. This woman victimized Emily again, saying that she was a victim liaison between Danny Irish and our family, leading Emily to believe that Daniel would soon be getting a new trial. After misrepresenting facts to Emily, she called the rest of the family and repeatedly to say that she would be coming to Shreveport to talk to us. Then we figured out what she was and we declined. However, she called last night. Russ's daughter will be 42, the same age Russ was when Daniel murdered him. 3 of Russ's 6 grandchildren are now the ages that Matt, his son, and Emily were when Daniel ripped their dad from them. Our mother lost her only son when he was 42, and she grieved for him for 16 years of his life. Russ lost his life before he saw his 2 children grow up to be successful, hardworking adults who live their lives and raise their beautiful children with the same values Russ passed on to them. I see a stop sign. I'm just going to stop, and I'm going to say that if you recommend clemency for Daniel Irish, he will be on the path to possible parole and release, which will be an unacceptable result, and it will only give him the opportunity to join his felon brother.
Mr. David Robin, Mr. David Henderson.
My name is David Henderson. I appreciate the hard work of the board. I wouldn't want your job. Russ Rowland was a friend of mine, former U.S. Marine, railroad worker, home builder, father of 2 fine children, a churchgoer. He is greatly missed by all who knew him. It greatly saddens me when I see his children and grandchildren who he has never seen and would be proud of them, such fine grandchildren who will never know what a good man he was. As board members, you are aware of the damage, the pain, the heartache that Danny Irish inflicted on the family and friends of Russ Rowland. I, for one, greatly miss Russ. He was a good man, a good friend, and a hard worker. Those kind of people are hard to come by. Danny Irish destroyed one. I sat through his murder trial at no time did Danny Irish or his 2 helpers deny planning his murder, carrying it out. I was horrified at the cold-blooded disregard for human life. Danny Irish found guilty, sentenced to death. This person showed no remorse at any time. Sentence needs to be carried out. It is a danger to everyone. And may I add, 5 days before Danny murdered Russ invited him to come to church. And he refused. So his newfound
Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
It's terrible.
Mr. Bob Button.
Good morning. My name's Robert. I'm a lifelong friend of Russ. We began elementary school together in the 1st grade. We graduated high school together from Northwood High School in 1962. Russ was a non-confrontational person. Our earliest members of Russ was that he always wanted to join the Marines. And after high school, our paths departed due to life choices. And upon hearing the murder of Russ Rowland, it was like a kick in the stomach. I couldn't believe anybody would take such actions against such a man that previously helped other people that owed rent to him to find jobs so that he could pay his bills. And then to plot and plan and execute 1st-degree premeditated murder involving other people, telling them what he was going to do, his plan, how he was going to do it, and how he was going to dispose of the body. And it's no way you can justify that. I've heard the religious aspect of it from the other side, but I also like to bring up in Exodus and Leviticus, if we're all Christian people here, God's law. God's law simply in the forefront was life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. So this time I'd like to remind everyone that we need to follow God's law first and let God decide what happens to his son. I hope and pray that we continue with the original sentencing of Daniel Irish.
Thank you very much. Kathy Rowland Walker.
Thank you. Russ Rowland was my husband. He was 42 on December the 30th, 1996, when Daniel Irish shot and killed him. His daughter was 14, freshman in high school. His son, Matt, 11. The day of the shooting, Matt was in Russ's care. They had just returned from what became their final father-son hunting trip. Daniel called Russ to pick up rent money. We have what you need, and we'll take care of it. He lured him to the house. Matt put on his shoes to go with his dad in the pickup truck. I praise God that Matt changed his mind and did not go. Can you imagine if he'd been in that car and saw his dad shot? Our lives were forever changed the day Daniel killed Russ, all for $441 in his wallet. He also robbed Emily and Matt of a lifetime of their fatherly love. He was not able to seek military recognitions, graduations, walk his daughter down the aisle. He was not able to share his son's successes, graduation, jobs, inheritance, and all that stuff. Russ missed out on critical years and opportunities to influence his children. Russ also now has 6 beautiful grandchildren that will never go. Being a single working parent during my children's teenage years was not easy, emotionally or financially. But I'm proud our children always maintain jobs to supplement income as needed. I'm proud that I taught my children that we must work for what they have. Clearly, that is not what Daniel thought. Has a history of robberies. Russ served his country in the Marines. He began life of working hard and building his family. He held down multiple jobs at a time, became a realtor, a home builder, and invested in some real property in order to provide for his family. He was a talented craftsman, enjoyed hunting, fishing, and people. Russ contributed positively to his community. He helped those less fortunate. He had many friends. He made people laugh and was a Christian. Daniel placed a gun directly to Russ's face. Russ was looking at him, screaming in pain and pleading for his life and asking Daniel not to shoot. Daniel showed him no mercy. I wonder if Daniel ever has nightmares about victims or sees that moment, because I see it often and it's very disturbing. He deserves no leniency for the protection of others, and this destroys the credibility of the justice system if he gets them.
Thank you very much. Mr. Matthew Rowland. Mr. Matthew Rowland on Zoom. Mr. Rowland, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can.
I apologize, and you'll have to bear with me. This is the first time I've publicly spoken about this since I was 11. But, as of late, I've been thinking, about my dad's last moments. As my mom said, with, Danny putting a gun to my father's eye and pulling the trigger. My son, my firstborn, will be 11 in 2 weeks, and that was the age I was. And I can't imagine what my dad went through, or what went through my father's eyes and mind when Danny put that gun to his head. I can't imagine leaving my son, and I just can't explain to you guys what this has done to me through my entire life. There's something within that man that no matter what scripture he reads, no matter what solemn thoughts he has in his cell, it doesn't go away. That's between him and God. And at one point, I would like to have a board or a nonprofit organization fight for the victims the way they fight to get this man off of death row. We want to be done with this. We want the execution carried out so that we can get on with our lives and quit having to relive this every time somebody gets a hair to prove a point or get a political position. We want to be done with this. Please get this man out of our lives. Thank you.
Very much. Appreciate you. Ms. Ellis.
Good morning. I'm Suzanne Ellis of the state of Louisiana and the parish of Caddo, and I would like to start off by thanking the board for this unprecedented opportunity to address you this stage of the proceedings. I appreciate it. I'm sure y'all have all read the state's opposition to Mr. Irish's application for clemency and the numerous procedural deficiencies and irregularities we laid out in that document. Today, I want to use my time to talk to you about how the contempt that Daniel Irish has shown for you as board members, for this entire process, and for the Rowland family should persuade you, to convince you to deny him an opportunity for a full clemency hearing. Please do not ever give him the opportunity to convince someone else to one day let him. This is the first page of the board's application. And I highlighted a sentence that says each question must be answered fully, truthfully, and accurately. Mr. Irish doesn't know the meaning of those words. If you look at his answer to question number 12, in your own words, and that's from the application, in your own words, describe your involvement in the crime. I would hope that that's where we would see Mr. Irish owning up to what he did, to taking some responsibility and possibly expressing some remorse. And you know what we got? We got a verbatim quote from the Louisiana Supreme Court opinion on the right of appeal. And that was it. And what of that was in Daniel Irish's own words? Nothing. Not only that, when your clemency investigator contacted him at Angola and asked him the same thing, Mr. Irish declined to answer. That after talking to counsel, I'm not going to answer these questions. And you know why? Mr. Irish can't answer that question fully, truthfully, and accurately because Mr. Irish cannot and will not accept responsibility for what he did in Westport. He never has and he never will. You look at question 14, criminal history. It's another example of his contempt for you and this process. He completely omitted any mention of his felony convictions. They're not listed on there. You see hot checks, you see traffic. He left those out. Now, when the clemency investigator interviewed him from Angola and confronted him with this, oh yeah, I was convicted of that, but I didn't really do it. I was taking the charge for my brother and somebody else. Once again, that's not a full, truthful, and accurate answer, and he is not taking responsibility for what he has done. Again, in his application, describe the effect on the victim's family. And he gave a very short, very bland statement saying that Russ Rowland's children testified briefly at the trial, but provided minimal information regarding the impact of their father's death. Well, legally, that's all they can do. What he left out was Emily Rowland's reaction to their investigator showing up unannounced at her house. She provided a letter, and we've included the text in our opposition that tells you exactly how she felt. And that was before this application was filed. Is any of that in their answer? No, it is not. In the application, they talk on and on. Danny has been a model prisoner and a positive influence on death row. He wasted 2 years of the state's resources in his legal efforts to obtain pornography. Took it up to the First Circuit. 2 years. Is this his, and I'm quoting here, constant advocacy on behalf of his fellow inmates? Then he ran a gambling operation from the cell and got caught and admitted to it. Is that an example of his positive influence on the death row prisoners? I submit to you, it's not. And again, by touting himself as a model prisoner and positive influence and completely omitting mention of those incidents, he has not provided you, the board, with full, truthful, and accurate information upon which to base your decision. And that segues into my next position. Can I have one more second? Look at the transcript attached to our opposition.
This man is not intellectually disabled, not even remote, just real. Thank you.
Ready to go? Okay. Freeman?
Okay, once again, as I've done previously, I want to thank everyone who showing up and, you know, I hate to be able to put y'all through this again. As she mentioned, it's right, you know, yeah, he was 18 when he committed the crime. He was 36 when he ran the gambling operation. Okay. He had 5 felony arrests while he was an adult. Due to his criminal activity, his poor arrest record, and his write-ups, and the nature of the offense, he served 27 years, and this was 100% premeditated. My vote is to deny.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Ms. Jackson?
I'll reiterate again, the purpose of today's session is to determine whether or not someone is entitled to a hearing, not whether they're going to get done, whether they're entitled to make their case. Mr. Irish was only 18 years of age. None of us at 18 are the same as we are at 17, or however age we might be today. You make decisions that are not wise. You make decisions that are not even rational. How they ever thought they would get away with this? This shows the immaturity behind your action. He's only had 5 write-ups since he's been incarcerated. And according to our rules, our procedures that we look at, he meets the requirement for a hearing. This is not a determination today of whether there will be a recommendation for clemency. This is just a decision on whether or not he gets to make the case. And simply because someone gets a hearing does not mean they're going to get a recommendation of commutation. Often, very often, we deny requests for clemency after we have had a full hearing. There have been people who look good on paper until we have the full hearing and the board gets a better picture from the interview and the process that we go through, and they get denied. There are other people who don't look as good on paper, but when you see them as an individual, you talk to them, you listen to them, you ask them probing questions, then you see that the paper picture is not an accurate representation of who they are. Our only task today is, does he meet the requirements that we generally follow in every case to determine if somebody just moves to that hearing process? Having reviewed Mr. Irish's record, or the record before us, he was only 18 at the time of the offense. He only had 55 disciplinary write-ups, and he meets the requirements of the step 4. So my vote would be to grant him a hearing, granting clemency, but a hearing, an opportunity to make his case.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Mr. Rochette?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I'd like to say this applicant is not in danger of being executed by the state of Louisiana. This applicant is applying for a commutation of sentence. That means he is asking this board to accept his application, be considered, commuting his sentence from death to life in prison without benefit of probation, parole, or suspension in sentence. What most people don't realize is that if he gets a recommendation for a hearing and gets a recommendation from the board, and it is signed by the governor, in 5 years, and Mr. Osh is only 45 years old, by the time he's 50, 51 years old, can apply for a second bite at the apple. And his sentence would be computed, if successful, and commuted to a number of years, he will become immediately parole eligible under Act 122 of the 2021 Louisiana State Legislature. And if he gets a recommendation from the board in that second bite of anything less than twice his sentence, he may be eligible for good time parole without a parole hearing. So this is all about him this is not about him being executed, because he did not have an execution date. He's been incarcerated for 25 years. Execution date has not been set. And if it is set, he has an avenue, he can ask for a reprieve from the governor or from this board. That is not paramount to this decision. This decision is whether we're going to commute from death to life without benefits. And then he knows there's a second step that he can take in 5 years, which ultimately might possibility lead to his release. So based on the egregious premeditated nature of this offense, he lured an individual who he was running property from to his home to rob and kill him. Expressed opposition from the victim's family, expressed opposition from the Caddo Parish DA's office and the Caddo Parish Sheriff's Office, opposition from the Louisiana Attorney General's office, and 65 other letters from friends, classmates, and the community at large, adamantly opposed to accepting this application. My vote is to not accept the application.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. I'd like to thank all the parties who came here today to speak. I listened to my colleagues all morning, and we have a responsibility to look at everything, to look at the crime that was committed, look at the person was at the time, look at what he's accomplished and where he is today. In my 3.5 years on this pardon board, and I feel an obligation just to say this, I have seen some egregious crimes, many of which did not get the death penalty. And oftentimes it depends on where you commit the crime and who the prosecutor is as to whether or not you get the death penalty. The case before us today is for an application to have a hearing to determine whether or not this inmate deserves a hearing to put on a case for clemency. While I understand all of the opposition, I do understand that. My vote today would be to grant the application for a hearing, not to release him, but to grant an application for a hearing. So my vote today would be to grant, 2 votes to deny, 2 votes to grant. Ultimately, the decision is to deny the application.
So ultimately, his co-defendant was denied the opportunity to have his death sentence commuted. And, what's interesting is that we see people in these death sentence commutation hearings saying, what's the big deal? He's just going to get off a death row. He's going to have a better quality of life in prison. Nothing else can happen. And we call them out because it's just a clear lie. And we've seen many of these death sentence commutation hearings where that's what their defense attorney would state. And it's just not true. We have seen many death sentence people who have been sitting on death row where it was then dropped for whatever legal reason off a death row, where then they had their sentence commuted from life to a certain term of years and paroled. We have seen it many times. So it's just something to point out. And I abbreviated this hearing a little bit for the sake of the size of this entire upload. If you want to see the full hearing where he has all of his supporters talk about, butterflies and how great of a guy this is, if you for some reason want to hear that, I'll put the link to the original hearing in the description. But as Richard pointed out, this is something that the family has continuously been going through. Look at listen to the date of events. December 1996 is when he is killed. February 1997 is Irish's trial. 1998 is Keith's plea sentencing. 2002 is Irish's appeal. 2014, again, Irish appeal. 2016, Keith resentencing trial. Then Keith, June 2017 appeal. Then Keith has his 2021 parole hearing, which we had just seen. Then October 2023 is Irish's commutation hearing, which we just now saw. And then now again, what we're about to see is Keith's rehearing in May 2024. This family has never gotten a break. I mean, just look at those. Look at the timestamps. It's every second they are being brought back to testify just to hold justice to these murderers. And that's crazy when one thinks about it, when one sees it. Just the trauma that they have to go through every time they get a letter, where then they have to be nervous. What will happen? Will justice be done? And they have to relive it, and they have to get up and they have to talk. And I think we hear that in this next hearing coming up, and we hear it with an explanation point. But with that, let's jump in.
Good morning. The Committee on Parole is called to order. Today's date is May the 1st, 2014, and the time is 9:50. My name is Carolyn Stapleton, and I am serving as the chairman of today's parole panel. My colleagues on the panel today are to my right, Mr. Pete Freeman, and to my left, Ms. Jerry Ledoux. The panel today is at DOC headquarters in Baton Rouge. Your name and your DOC number for the record.
Yes, ma'am. Audy K 393-128.
Your offense is first-degree murder. Your sentencing date was 1/27/1998. I'm sorry. Your sentence is for life. Your parole date is December 30th, 2021. Good time you're not eligible for. Your full-time date is life. At this time, we will have your supporter input. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead and start the interview.
Oh, I'll do the question. I'm sorry. Okay. Mr. Keith. Pardon?
We have a couple of guests here that need to introduce themselves, and I believe one of them is speaking.
Oh, we do?
Yeah, we're updating. If y'all could go ahead and introduce yourself for the record, please state your name and relationship to the offender.
Connie Allen, I'm the mother.
Okay,
Brittany Ainsley, and I'm Audy's sister.
and who will be speaking today?
I will be speaking, Connie Allen, on behalf of Audy.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead with your interview, Ms. Carolyn.
Okay. My interview is, for you, Mr. Keith, as I see that you were 16 years old when this crime occurred. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And also, I saw that you said that there was another person involved that held a gun to you and told you that you had to shoot this man. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and then how you complete it and tell me what all happened.
Excuse me, I didn't hear you.
You tell me the rest of what happened in that event, that this man was holding a gun to you. What was your relationship with this man and what happened?
Yes, ma'am. I just became short-term friends with him. I've only been in the neighborhood a few months. Brief acquaintance. He pulled a gun on me. He went over a plot is what he did, of what he wanted to do to Mr. Rowland. And I refused participation with what was he had planned. And we made a trip to the grocery store because one of my co-defendants said she needed to go grocery shopping. So we went grocery shopping. And my co-defendant, Mr. Irish, he asked Miss Christy Klein to stop at the gas station and make a phone call to call Mr. Rowland to come pick up rent money. He didn't get in contact with him. He talked to his secretary. So we went grocery shopping and came back. And he stopped again, made a phone call, and said he did in fact talk to Mr. Rowland. He said Mr. Rowland was going to come and pick up his rent money between 3 and 3:30. We got back to the house. I put in a movie. Miss Klein put up the dishes, and a short time later, she said that Mr. Rowland's here. He's here. She took off running to the back of the house, and that's when Mr. Irish came up through the hallway, and Mr. Rowland was in the door, and he had the rifle in his hand. He normally keeps all of his guns directly behind the chair that I was sitting in, and he told me that he wanted me to shoot him, and I was shocked. I didn't know what to do. I'd never been in a situation like this before. I was scared. So he picked it, he cocked the gun and pointed at me and said, "You better shoot." I grabbed the gun and I shot him.
And what happened?
He fell backwards onto the porch. Mr. Irish came up to me, took the shotgun from me. He attempted to cock it and shoot him again with the same gun. It jammed up. He put it down and he picked the 30-30 rifle up and he stood over Mr. Rowland and he shot Mr. Rowland in the head. Before Mr. Rowland, he begged for his life. Then he told me to go to the truck. I was still scared to death. I didn't know what to do. Be witnessing this and being directly involved in it, even though I refused to participate and I was still actively involved in it. I went to the truck and retrieved Mr. Rowland's wallet and brought it back and gave it to Mr. Irish.
Mr. Rowland was dead at that time.
Yes, ma'am.
Then what happened?
I left the residence and went across the street to try and get some help. Nobody would help. They told me to leave. I went to another friend's house. A short time later, my mother and my stepfather come and pick me up, and they brought me back to the scene of the crime. And we talked to the detectives, and the detectives advised my mother to bring me home, wait for a little while, and bring me to the sheriff's station, which they did.
Who called the police?
Jason Williams called the police. They said he called 911.
He heard the gunshots or you went there? How do you know about it? He heard the gunshots or he was there or you went to him or what?
He came through after everything was, after Mr. Rowland was dead, he showed up.
I see. And then he saw it and then he went ahead and called for help.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, well, today you have strong opposition from law enforcement, and there's nothing you can do about that. I see that, you know, you've been taking a lot of classes, and you've been taking carpentry classes, and you've gotten certified. And you got your GED, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir. And you want to name a few other classes?
I'm currently going into my second year of HVAC school. Better Man is sponsored by Malachi Dads. Thinking for a Change, as well as when I came to Hunt, I implemented myself into the community to try and make a difference with the younger people that are here that are at risk, the young adults. And I co-facilitate Thinking for a Change, and I facilitate Better Man after partaking in that class. And I graduated. I took the torch and I started leading the community with that as well.
That's wonderful. At this time, I'm going to pass the questioning over to my fellow board member, Mr. Freeman.
Okay, Mr. Danny, let me ask you this. You claim that you did not want to do it, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. But yet you were the first one that shot, right?
Yes, sir.
Why didn't you shoot the guy making you do it? Why did you shoot an innocent man?
I've never been in a situation like that before. I had a gun pointed at me. I didn't know what to do.
Okay. Why were y'all robbing? You needed money for drugs? What was going on in your life at that time?
I was in school. I was on Christmas break. I was just somewhere we can out to hang out with on the weekends. I was new to the neighborhood. We just moved back to Shreveport from Ruston, Louisiana.
And after all of this, as nervous and scared as you were, you ran to the truck and got his wallet, correct?
Yes, sir.
And Miss Klein stayed there to clean up the blood, correct?
Yes, sir.
How long did y'all plan this? Was it planned earlier that day? How was it planned?
He wasn't over talking about doing, but he talked about doing all kinds of crimes and nothing never came about it. We all, excuse me, I didn't hear you. Could you please?
No, sir. I'm listening to you, sir.
Okay. He always talked about committing other crimes and never done any of them. Everybody thought they were just talking. So, you know, I didn't pay no attention to his words. I didn't realize the weight that his words carried at that time.
Okay, I have no further question.
Okay, Ms. Ledoux?
I would like to ask Mr. Keith, do you have a child? It says in the records you did, but.
Yes, ma'am.
So you went to prison 16?
16.
And you have a child from prior to that?
Yes, ma'am. Prior to prison, yes, ma'am.
Are you currently receiving any psychiatric treatment?
No, ma'am.
And then they did some personality assessments on you, or you rather. So it's not unusual to have a significant number of write-ups when you go to jail as long as you did. Your last write-up was in 2019, a 21C. Why haven't you had any write-ups since then?
Because I started implementing myself in the self-help classes and I was realizing the mistake that I was making. I needed to better myself to become a better person.
There's one last question. We have significant amount of information in this record. And I'm not able to locate it right at this minute, but I read in a record that you had some problems at your resentencing. Do you remember being in court for resentencing?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Did anything happen during that time in court that
indicated that you may not have had the best attitude.
Yes, ma'am. I kind of outbursted. It was at a time where I had never seen my attorney. I felt like I was by myself. I was all alone. I followed all the motions. And I felt this is my only chance at freedom. And when this man showed up in the courtroom and he told the judge that he had been coming to see me, I'd never had any contact with him, correspondence, letters, phone calls, visits, didn't reach out to none of my family members. And he showed up to court and I used profane language.
I just wondered, thank you for explaining that. That explanation is helpful. I don't have any further questions.
Okay, at this time, we're going to speak to your supporters that are there at, with Miss Hutchinson. Oh, she was the class, okay. Well, then your sister that's there. Your sister, what's her name? I'm sorry.
Madam Chairman, I think it's his mother that wishes to speak.
Oh, the mother, okay, the mother. Would you like to speak, ma'am? On behalf, okay, and I'm sorry, what is your name again?
My name is Connie Allen.
Nowlin?
Nowlin. Nowlin.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Nowlin. Okay, you can speak on behalf of your son.
Yes, ma'am. I'm here to speak on behalf of my family. We have been in full support of him as much as possible. Sending materials for his training in his HVAC school. We are here for him for whatever he needs, in full support. We pray for him and pray that for mercy on the court. And I know he's apologized to the family before, but we want to apologize on our behalf as well. Because we know that this is something that could have been prevented, but it wasn't. And I do apologize for the loss of Mr. Rowland, for the anguish and hurt that's happened in the family. From the pit of my heart.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, thank you very much for your statement, ma'am. At this time, we will hear from Andrew Hundley by way of Zoom.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Andrew Hundley, Executive Director of Louisiana Parole Project. We're here today on behalf of Audy Keith to express our organization's intent to provide Audy reentry support if he is released by this board. First, I'd like to start off by acknowledging this was certainly a senseless crime that Audy participated in. We're here today, and Audy's here today because of the U.S. Supreme Court's decisions in Miller and Montgomery and Act 277 of the 2017 legislative session that provided individuals like Audy parole eligibility. As this board's aware, our organization has provided reentry support for the juvenile lifers affected by those decisions that have been released over the last several years. Nearly all of them have done their reentry with Louisiana Parole Project. So we don't take every client who applies for our support. We screen them, and what we found with Audy is that he has consistently displayed remorse for his actions, taken responsibility actions with our organization. And he has a record of rehabilitation and growth, especially over the last several years. If Audy were to be released, he would not return to the Caddo area. He would be housed in our residential reentry program in Baton Rouge. He would go through extensive reentry programming with our organization. He would have access to our staff social worker and undergo multiple assessments. We would meet all of his mental health and other related needs. And we provide him that housing for as long as it took for him to work towards self-sufficiency. In light of the skills that Audy's earned during his incarceration, we believe that he could enter the workforce and eventually become self-sufficient. But in summary, we just wanted to offer our commitment to the board that if Audy is released, we commit to providing him long-term housing and reentry support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hundley. At this time, we speak to the warden, please. Do you have
Yes,
anything
ma'am.
like to say?
First of all, my heart goes out to the victim's family for their courage and participating in this hearing today. Audy got here from Angola in 2022, and since he's been here, he has been working on himself. He didn't mention that he also took victim impact training here at the prison. In March of 2023, became a trustee and has remained in that custody role since then. So he's been a trustee for a little over a year. He is participating in our HVAC school, and he does assist our maintenance department with various HVAC projects and some on-the-job training that he's going through right now. He hasn't been an issue for us, and you know, everything else that I think that he mentioned is confirmed in the record.
Thank you, sir. At this time, I will ask to speak to your attorney at Hunt Correctional. Ms. Hutchinson, please.
She usually go after Mr.
Oh, wait a minute. After Mr. Audy?
After Mr. Audy.
Okay.
We'll wait till the end and she'll close it.
Okay.
After the DA's last.
No?
Allow the attorney to make his closing statement. And the attorney.
Now?
Now, right?
Okay, Mr. Audy, will you please make your closing statement?
I'm sorry, we're not gonna do the opposition.
The opposition will go next.
Okay.
They'll go last.
Yes, ma'am. I'd like to take the time now to say how sorry I am to the son and the daughter, because I realized the mistake that I made, that what they're missing with Mr. Rowland as their best friend, their life coach, their hero, their father. I'd like to take the time to apologize to the wife. I realize now through my training what she has missed with her husband, her support system, the glue that holds the family together, her happiness, her soulmate. I'd like to apologize to the sister. I realize what you miss in your best friend as well. And I'd like to apologize to his friends, the people he served with in the military, and the rest of the community and society. Because at the time, I didn't know, but what I do know now is that the victim is broad, that it casts it out on the entire community with a ripple effect, have all the people that were affected by this horrendous crime. And from 16 to 43 years old, I have rehabilitated myself and changed the way that I think. I changed my ideals, my principles, and my beliefs, where I use better thinking.
Thank you, Mr. Key.
We'll hear from the attorney.
Okay, this time we will hear from the attorney, Ms. Hutchinson.
On December 30th, 1996, I had a rifle pointed at him with one instruction: to shoot the man at the door. A man he had never met before, and a man he had no animosities for. His decision, this inability at 16 years old to get out of that situation caused a great harm to a family and a community. And it led Audy down a path of self-destruction once he got into prison. Feelings of unworthiness for taking Mr. Rowland's life permeated his mind. It was evident in his actions. 27 years later, Audy is still haunted by his decision. The anguish, the pain, and the sorrow, the regret are so much a part of his day, it almost feels ingrained in his DNA. The isolation from his family, the uncomfortableness with life in prison, and his youth led to outbursts and disciplinary write-ups. But these are all things to be expected. You see, when Miller versus Alabama was decided, they identified these traits in the youth: short-sightedness, impulsiveness, and susceptibility to peer influences. But they also recognize that these traits are less fixed in youth, and that over time, their true character will develop and come to the forefront. And with that guidance, this board produced guidelines to measure the character, maturity, and rehabilitation of the now adult that entered prison so young. So with that, I'd like to just quickly review Audy against these guidelines. We've already discussed the age and circumstances of the offense and the hallmark features of youth: peer pressure, susceptibility to those influences. But today, Audy has shown growth and remorse and maturity. His contribution to the welfare of others and his volunteer work, his facilitating classes,
have been evident in his record. He's even signed up for NA and AA classes to help others with addiction. He entered prison with a 9th grade education, but has gained his GED. He's done carpentry school, crew management, and now HVAC school. In addition, everything that was brought up in his previous parole hearing, he has completed. Any recommendations from the previous board. He's maintained his disciplinary record and done community service. He's truly sorry for the pain that he caused and the great loss to the Rowland family, and has truly changed himself inside and out. Because of Audy's demonstrated growth, maturity, and rehabilitation, we humbly request this board grant his parole with any conditions that the board deems necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hutchinson. At this time, we're going to go to the opposition statements. And we will begin with people that are on Zoom. It will be Ms. Kathy Walker, the victim's wife, Matt Rowland, the victim's son, Linda Rowland, the victim's sister. Present watching on Zoom will be David Henderson. He's a friend. Emily Coop, who is the victim's daughter. And then here at headquarters to represent the district attorney's office from Caddo will be Ms. Leon Fitzgerald. So we will start off. Ms. Walker, are you ready?
I am.
Can you go ahead?
I apologize that my picture is kind of dark, but that's just the way my camera does that. It's very unfortunate that you can't see this picture of Russ.
Thank you, ma'am.
I just want to point out that he was 17 at the time when he, can you hear me? Can y'all hear me okay?
It's good for a second.
One moment. Just one moment.
Hey, I'm sorry.
Please
Yes,
proceed.
okay. I just wanted to show his picture and to tell you at this time, Russ Rowland was 17 when he went into the military. Russ Rowland was my husband. He was 42 on December the 30th of 1996 when Audy shot and killed him. His daughter Emily, 14, in her freshman year of high school. His son Matt, 11. On this day, Matt was in Russ's care. They had just returned from what became their final father-son hunting trip. Russ was lured to pick up owed rent money. When he arrived, he was ambushed. Matt put on his shoes to go with his dad that day. I praise God that Matt changed his mind and decided not to go. Can you imagine what would happen if he had been there? Our lives forever changed the day Russ was killed, all for $141 in his wallet. He also robbed Emily and Matt of a lifetime of their father's love. He was not able to be at military recognitions, graduations, and weddings, job successes, nor tell them the jokes that he was so well known for. Russ missed out on critical years and opportunities to influence, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble reading, to influence his children. And he now has 6 grandchildren that will never know him. Being a single working parent during my children's teenage years was not easy emotionally or financially. Our children always maintained jobs to supplement financial obligations, and I'm proud that I taught my children that they must work for what they have. Clearly, that is not what Audy thought. Russ served his country as a Marine. He began a life of working and building his family. He held down multiple jobs at a time. He became a realtor, a home builder, and invested in rental property to provide for his family. He was a talented craftsman, enjoyed hunting, fishing, and people. Russ contributed positively to the community, helped those less fortunate, had many friends, and made others laugh. And he was also a Christian. Audy participated in the planning of the ambush. He had many opportunities to stop it. I wonder if he ever has nightmares and sees Russ screaming in pain and pleading for his life. This is a lasting image for me. All choices have consequences, good or bad. Some cannot be undone. Any relaxation to Audy to the sentence degrades the credibility of our judicial system. Statistics show that 60% of people that commit serious crimes will offend again. This is not an isolated incident for Audy, but what it elevated to. He showed Russ no mercy. And honestly, I'm fearful for him being released back into the community for the safety of all. He's demonstrated this capacity to hurt and kill, and And I just thank you for your consideration. I know it's a difficult position to put the board in.
Well, Ms. Walker, it's also understandable that it was difficult for you to have to reopen these old wounds. That you
Absolutely.
talked about. So, my condolences to you for that. Okay, now we're going to go to Matt Rowland. Are you available to speak, Matt?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Okay.
I did not prepare a statement, but I just want to tell you right now that, you know, as he sits there today, this is the very first time that I personally have ever heard the words "I'm sorry" out of his mouth. You can see my sister shaking her head. You know, we've been told over and over and over that they've apologized and apologized. Today's the first day it's ever come out of his mouth where I've seen it and heard it. You say you've taken all these victims advocates courses and all this. I think you need to retake a lot more of them, because the story you just told, the one thing that you did miss out on that I really picked up on was your accountability and ownership of what you did. I spoke at Danny's hearing recently, and I got very emotional because I'm tired of dealing with this. Y'all are in my life every day, and I have to do this every couple of years, and it's exhausting. It's exhausting. I want to move on from you and having to deal with this. I'm tired of watching my sister cry and struggle having to deal with this every day. Go away. Leave my family alone. You know, you talk about the carpentry classes, the HVAC classes that you did. Well, you know, somebody getting out of prison with all that, my dad would have been the very first one to offer you a job and put you into a residence to get you on your feet. But you took that away.
Just for a second. I want you to say everything you're saying, but just tell it to us.
Yes.
Say to us.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm telling it to
don't
y'all.
say what you need to say, though.
This is my time to speak, please.
Okay.
I'm against this wholeheartedly. You know, I'll tell you the exact same story I told Danny recently. My son, my firstborn, is 11 years old. That's the age I was when my father was taken from me. And I look at him every other day, and I know what me and him go through, and I know what experiences we have. And it pisses me off to no extent that you took those experiences away from me. You took those experiences away from my sister. So if you think you'll ever get forgiveness from me, even as a Christian, you're strongly misguided. That's all I've got to say.
Well, Matt, I appreciate your words, and I know that you have every reason, because like I said to your mother, this just reopens all the pain and the hurt and the loss. So I understand that. Okay, now we're going to go to Linda.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Linda Rowland.
Yes. I'm Linda. My brother is Russ Rowland, who was murdered by Audy Keith. This is the last photo of Russ taken the day before his murder. It's the last photo of Russ with his son, Matt. The only thing true about Audy's story is that he shot Russ and he got his wallet from the truck. Audy knew the morning of December 30th, 1996, that he was going to help a friend kill and rob my brother Russ. Audy went to his friend's house several days prior, where the scheme to kill and murder Russ was planned. He and his friends even made a plan to dispose of Russ by putting his dead body in a sleeping bag, take it to a friend's where they would cut it up with a chainsaw and dump it in a swamp. Why didn't Audy go home that day and tell somebody? Audy had nothing to gain from participating in this scheme with his friends. Audy didn't even know Russ. Why did Audy leave his house that morning knowing he was going to take part in a murder robbery? After shooting Russ in the abdomen with intent to kill him, Audy went to Russ's truck and took his wallet. If he felt threatened, as he stated, Why didn't Audy run to his house and call for help? In the 2016 resentencing hearing of Audy, he lashed out and was disrespectful to Judge Emanuel. She repeatedly asked him to calm down. When he didn't, she had Audy escorted from the courtroom by 2 deputies. At Audy's parole hearing in June of 21, Audy took no responsibility for his actions. He showed no remorse and offered no apology to our family when he spoke. We learned at that hearing that Audy had received 60 disciplinary write-ups while in Angola, 13 of which were sex acts. I feel that with his limited social skills, Audy will not thrive in society. I feel that his lack of coping and decision-making abilities will be strongly impaired. I know if Audy is released, my family will live in fear, knowing he is in our community. I would request a no contact order and that he be ordered to live outside Caddo or Bossier Parish. In less time than I've been given to speak, my family's life was changed forever. The impact of Audy's action is never ending. Mr. Freeman, you may remember that my family and friends were in Baton Rouge last October to plead with you to uphold the death penalty of Audy's co-conspirator and the other participant in Russ's murder. You heard the grief that my family still lives with. Russ never got to experience the joy of his own children grow up. He was deprived of knowing his beautiful 6 grandchildren. I hope that you never have to feel the pain we've endured or experienced the tragedy such as this. I pray that you deny Audy Keith the opportunity for parole. Please support Audy's original sentence of life without benefit of parole that was promised to our family.
Ms. Rowan, thank you so much. And just like your nephew said, and his wife said, this is very, this does open old wounds all the time. So we understand your grief and your sorrow. Thank you very much for your statements. At this time, we're going to recognize Ms. Fitzgerald from the District Office at Caddo.
Hi.
Hey,
Good morning.
good morning.
Yes, I'm Leanne Fitzgerald. I'm the Director of the Victim Assistance Program for the Caddo Parish DA's office. And I had just started working at the DA's office whenever this crime happened. I remember it very vividly because it was so shocking and horrendous to our entire community. It was in the Blanchard area, which is north of Shreveport, and it's a small community where a lot of people knew the Rowlands, had grown up with them, gone to school with them. It was just one of those things that you never forget, the community never forgets about. And the defendant, Mr. Keith, had been hanging with this crew all day. He knew what Danny Irish was up to. And he knew when Danny called Russ to come back over to the trailer so they could rob him. He knew that that was going down. He knew that Danny had guns, but he still hung around. He chose to stay there, knowing what was about to go down, knowing the plan. And it was only after Mr. Rowland was shot dead and had been dragged inside the house and blood was being cleaned up that he went into the woods and basically thought, I better get out of here. But not until he had even gone to Mr. Rowland's truck and fetched his wallet for Danny Irish. This was not a split-second decision, as Ms. Hutchison and others have referred to it as. He had plenty of opportunity to get away from this, plenty of opportunity to stop it from happening, to try to help Mr. Rowland. He could have called 911, but he didn't. And this doesn't seem like the behavior of someone who did not want to be involved in this or who did not want to participate, which is the first thing that Mr. Keith always says is that I didn't participate or I didn't want to participate. Well, that's not what your actions reflect. So he certainly didn't seem remorseful on December 30th of 1996 that Mr. Rowland was dead. Mr. Rowland was a businessman. As I mentioned, he was only 42 years old. He was raising his children. He was living an all-American life along with his family. He was a former Marine who, as Ms. Walker mentioned, at 17 years old, signed papers willingly to serve this country. As you've heard, he left 2 small children behind that Miss Kathy had to rear without a dad. That photo that Linda showed of Matt and his dad, I've seen that photo many times over the years, and it hurts my heart every time I see it. And I think, thank God they have that day together, even though it's bittersweet to see that photograph. I grew up myself deer hunting with my dad, and this is the South, so I can just imagine the excitement of that day, how proud Mr. Rowland was that Matt had killed a deer, and that it was just a good memory and a good day. And on that day, Matt had a father, the father that many kids wish for on December 30th of 1996. But on December 31st of 1996, just like that, he no longer had a dad, thanks to the really poor decisions of Mr. Keith and his cohorts. Matt and Emily became the kids who had to return to school shyly and traumatized because their father had gotten killed over the Christmas break while everybody else was celebrating the holidays with their family. They had a funeral for their father. I'm sure they had other kids looking at them awkwardly, not knowing what to say because their dad had been the victim of the murder that the entire community was talking about. And in regards to Audy's record, we had the parole hearing in 2021. Frankly, I would describe it as disastrous, and I think that the panel of board members at that time would probably agree with me. Audy showed no remorse for his part in the murder, even after almost 27 years. I commend him for not having any write-ups in the past 5 years. I hope he's on the right path now, but we still can't forget about the 58 write-ups in the 22 years before that, 5 or 6 of which were sex-related. These were not offenses because he wasn't making his bed or he was waking up late. He was caught with a cell phone, which is a huge security risk for a prison and everyone inside of it. And I don't know what all the sex offenses were about, but I just don't think that almost 5 years of good behavior cancel out 22 years of unacceptable behavior. If it took 22 years for Mr. Keith to adjust to prison in such a way that he can conform and follow the rules, then how long do we think it will take him in the outside world to do that with all of its challenges and temptations? And is it worth the risk to find that out? So yes, he was only 16 when this happened. Yes, there may have been coercion by the defendant. And yes, we have all these studies now, which I respect, about the development of the brain being later than once thought. But what was Mr. Keith's frontal lobe doing in 2016 when he cursed his attorney in open court in front of the judge and had to be shut down, which has been referred to today? Or when one of our prosecutors and investigators came to interview him in preparation for the Danny Irish trial, and he lied and accused them of attacking him. An investigation was conducted on all of that, and his allegations were unfounded. And so the studies that I've read show that by the mid-20s, a male brain should be fully developed in the ways that provide for self-control, impulse control, sound decision-making. But I submit to you that Audy's was still deficient long after that. And clearly, he works on a long learning curve. So I think we need more than 5 years of good behavior to show us that he's ready for the outside world. You know, what it basically comes down to is this is a murder of a human being, a military veteran of our country who was shot first by Mr. Keith and finished off by Danny Irish as he laid on the ground begging for his life. All because they wanted to commit a robbery. This board has 34 letters that I'm sure you all have reviewed of loved ones, friends, family of Mr. Rowland, who took the time to sit down and express to strangers what the loss has meant to them. And I submit to you that this is just a drop in the bucket. I still encounter people to this day in the community when they hear where I work. They say, "Oh, do you know the Rowland family?" And I'm like, "Yes, I do know the Rowlands." And I just hear, "Oh, Linda and I went to school together," or "I grew up on their street," or "I went to school with the kids." Good people. Russ and I used to work together. So this was a loss, and these stories are not platitudes. This is everyday life for these people. And 27 years is a long time, but Mr. Keith is only 43 years old. He is older than Russ Rowland made it to be. 5 years of good behavior does not warrant parole for a murderer. Please make Audy prove that he can continue to earn the grace and mercy of this board. I am asking the board very respectfully on behalf of the Caddo District Attorney, James Stewart, and on behalf of the Rowland family and the community at large, to please deny Mr. Keith's request for parole. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fitzgerald. Thank you for your comprehensive statement also. At this time, the panel will vote, and they'll start with me because it was my case. Mr. Keith, I heard everything you had to say, and you have lots of improvement in your life. Can y'all hear over there? Mr. Keith? Okay. You have made wonderful improvements in your life, and you know, taking the different classes and the HVAC, all of those things will help you. So I listened to everything you had to say, and I listened to your attorney, and I listened to your mother, and everything you said was important. But at the same time, everything the victim's family had to say was important. His name was Russ Rowland, and he was a veteran, and he did have a little boy and a little girl and a wife that loved him. And in that instant, their life changed forever, and it will never be the same because generations will pass by, and he'll just feel something that they will verbally make a memory in their life. They won't get to sit on his lap and hear stories. And like they said, he was a good storyteller. They loved him very much. And thank goodness for the last photo that his son has of them hunting together. Those are the kind of things that I think of too. I think of his daughter, Emily, who didn't have her father to walk her down the aisle. She got married. I think of Matt and Emily when they had their children, and Kathy when she had the grandchildren, and she wasn't able to ever look next to her and say, "Russ, remember when Matt did that, and remember Emily did that." Those are the kind of future things that they've lost because of this murder. So I do think of that. And my vote today is to deny because of extreme law enforcement opposition. And Ms. Fitzgerald told the truth. I did read those 34 letters. And that's a lot. You might get 2 or 3 sometimes, but 34 speaks volumes. So extreme victim opposition on those 2 circumstances, I vote to deny. Mr. Freeman?
Okay, Mr. Audy, first off, I want to thank everyone that showed up today, both from your family and especially from the victim's family. It's a shame that we have to reopen old wounds because of certain laws that were passed after y'all thought he was gonna do life in prison. So, you know, Mr. Audy, basically, you need to accept more responsibility. My vote is to deny extensive victim opposition and strong law enforcement and seriousness of the offense.
My vote is the same as my colleagues for the same reasons. Nothing more to add.
Okay. At this time, Mr. Keith, today your parole has been denied. And this concludes our business today, and we will adjourn at 10:41.
Wow. So that we had at least 3 mic drops in each of those final statements, with his son saying, "This is my time to speak, please." His mom said, "In less time than I've been given to speak, my life has been changed forever." And then the DA with, what was his frontal lobe doing in 2017 when he cursed out his attorney? Now, it was interesting to me, at least, is that it was as if the victims were expecting the board to say stop talking, like they had done in the initial parole hearing and then at the commutation hearing. You can feel their, I think, maybe I'm projecting, the anxiety that they were, almost the expectations that they were going to be told to stop talking. But this board's a little different, and I'm not sure they ever would have stopped them to talk. And I really do like this board. It's a very, it's not just the board, it's with the new governor. It's almost like the culture of the board seems to have changed quite a bit, starting with, if you realized, the defense, I'm sorry, the family gets to speak last. His defense attorney was surprised when they were asked to go and make their statement before the victims' family. And as you can see, that's an entire shift. The victims get to speak last. Isn't that interesting? And you know, it does make it. There's something just so. We have seen 16-year-olds get released on this board all the time. And you have to do a lot wrong not to get released. And it's not just this board. This is something that's being done on a federal level across all, the different jurisdictions. We have seen, and it's like, as someone who commits a crime when they're 16, what you have to do to get released is just not be kind of like a sociopath. You just have to, don't get a million write-ups. Just do what you're supposed to do in prison, and you'll get released. And if you do the exact opposite, it's good to see that they're not. You know, it's crazy to think this is the first time that he even apologized. Even with all the support from the Parole Project and all his attorneys and all of his guidance and his girlfriend, now wife, and it's like he couldn't have drafted in his first parole hearing that I'm sorry, and he did it in this time. But it's still the idea that he sticks to the excuse that his co-defendant was holding a gun to his head, and that's why he pulled the trigger. He was in fear for his life. And I love that Mr. Freeman asked him at the beginning that question, why didn't you just shoot him? Because I feel like that's a question that's not asked. We hear this excuse often, right? Not necessarily these parole hearings, but you hear it in different true crime stuff where they're like, well, they were pointing a gun at me and I was afraid. And it's just not believable. It's just that scenario, to think that scenario actually happened, where his co-defendant's pointing a gun at his head while he's holding a shotgun and saying, shoot him or I'll shoot you. The whole thing makes no sense. And I would argue, if I was his attorney, if I was anyone in his life, not that, I mean, God forbid to put me in that scenario, but I would argue, I would tell him, look, man, I get that actually happened, or you believe that happened, but don't say it because no one's going to believe you. Just say that you were a monster and you did it and your frontal lobe and whatever other excuse everyone else is making for you. But to still stick with all these years later, the story that, well, my co-defendant had a gun pointed to my head. It's just crazy. I mean, I think it just tells you everything you need to know about him. And there's something off to me about that. I think it says it all there, in my opinion. Now, as you can see, my little one jumped in to join me at the end of this, so I'm gonna wrap it up a little bit. So, and those of you who maybe you haven't yet seen the new parole board members, but she is a star. She's the victim's advocate. I've actually seen her use the word survivor. She says survivors in along with victims like we do here. She's like the new Mr. Roche, and she's incredible. I mean, I'm pretty sure that she actually broke down and cried when she described how the daughter, how he wasn't able to walk his daughter down the aisle, and that's incredible. She also mentioned how she read all 34 letters. That was very Roche-like. We've heard him, and I believe it. They read every letter, and her background. I'll just read it again for those of you. I did this once before, but I'll do it. I know many of you haven't seen that hearing, but she retired from the East Baton Rouge Sheriff Office in 2014 with over 2 decades experience in the Crime Victims Assistance Services. During her tenure as EVR Crime Victim Assistant Division Director, she was awarded the National Sheriff's Association Award for Crime Victim Services and National Crime Victim Rights Weekly Community Awareness Grant. Since her retirement, Ms. Stapleton has served in various capacities in victim services, including position with the 16th Judicial District Attorney. She also served in the Crime Victims Reparation Board and represents the 6th Congressional District under the Administrative Governor Bobby Jindal and Governor John Bell Edwards. And it's like a true victim or survivor advocate. And every time I see her, I love what I see. And I know a lot of us had anxiety about Mr. Roche leaving, and so happy to see that he's replaced by a true champion. I mean, we have seen her so far state the things that we have screamed about for so long. And I'll have it pop up at the end, the hearing that I'm referencing to, okay, where she states, where's the DA? She says that victims of who do things, perpetrated roaches who do things to children have a high recidivism rate. And what was the third thing that she said? She said programs, which is always a big plus, versus, we always do at least one board member saying programs. And then we have this other member. We didn't really hear from her much in this specific hearing, but if you're curious, Jerry Ledoux, Jerry is returning committee is returning to the committee of on parole after serving 5 years under previous administration. We've never seen her though. She took advantage of multiple Association of Parole Authority international training events during the tenure on the board. As you can hear, he just called me Dad-a-do, and that is actually what I go by. I know a man do here and Dad-a-do at home. During the tenure on the board, she learned her MS in communication from the University of Louisiana, Lafayette, where she wrote her qualitative thesis, Stakeholder Theory in Medical Parole Reform. Recently, she has served 7 years as a congressional liaison to the United States House of Representatives Speaker. So she's like a real professional politician type, but it's good to see quality on the board, right? How do I finish this? It's it's just like you just want this to stop for the family. You just want this to stop. I don't know when his next parole hearing can be scheduled. Can he just apply for it in 2 more years, or if there's a longer waiting period? It's like the only thing that he needs to do, and it could be the The next one, he's just going to get it again because he was 16 and because they found it unconstitutional not to sentence someone under the age of 18 to life for these type of crimes. So that's why he has a chance of parole. If he just doesn't get any write-ups, maybe they'll grant him again in the future. But that is disturbing to think that this family, no matter what, is going to have to, unless something happens, you know, in another way, is going to have to show up again and again and again. But it was good to see a parole board that seemed to show genuine empathy towards the family and respect. They didn't cut them off. They let them speak. And at one point, you know, they did have to say, hey, you have to talk to us. But that's something that they have to do, you know, even that's just the way the form. That was okay. I didn't have anything against that. And they did it in a she did it in a respectful way, not like the Miss Renats where it's like, talk to the board, you know. It was done like more the empathetic way. But thank you, Richard. You know, Richard pointed out the hearing. He said, man, I know that you've been gone on the trip for a long time. I need to hear the whole thing. But this is an important hearing. It really shows and calls out. And also because we had done the two prior hearings to tie it all together. So thank you, Richard, for making it easy to do that and making that possible. And I think it really does paint a picture, one that we have to tell, a story that we have to tell. And thank you all for being here. And with that, I'll let you